He who cannot obey himself will be commanded by others. Nietzsche. They didn't raise you to be free. They raised you to be good, obedient, pleasant. Since the beginning you were shaped to kneel, not to stand. Rewarded for silence, punished for truth. They called it character. They called it humility. But it was fear. Fear dressed as kindness. Fear applauded by the crowd. Fear that taught you to disappear and to feel proud of it. And so you shrank, bit by bit, until you forgot you were ever meant to take up space. You learned to smile while choking, to say yes while burning, to call submission virtue. You think you're moral, but you're just afraid. Afraid to offend. Afraid to stand alone. Afraid to want. What they sold you as virtue was a leash. Polished, praised, and locked around your neck. But something in you remembers, something wild, something loud, something that wants to scream, but flinches every time. And that is where we begin. The sacred lie, obedience disguised as virtue. You call it goodness, but what you really mean is obedience. Not courage, not power, but the habit of pleasing. You've learned to wear virtue like a mask, soft, smooth, acceptable, a perfect illusion, a perfect prisoner. Since childhood, the lesson was clear, and it cut deep. Don't feel too much. Don't want too loud. Don't think for yourself. They called it maturity, but it was sterilization. They amputated your instincts and named it discipline, and you thanked them for it. Every time you swallowed your truth to avoid conflict, every time you smiled through betrayal just to be kind, every time you said yes when everything inside screamed no, you were not being noble. You were disappearing, and they clapped. Because the world does not reward the free, it rewards the manageable. It bows to the tame. It uplifts the agreeable. It canonizes the ones who don't disturb the order. But you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to burn. And deep down you know this. There's a part of you, locked away, starving in the basement, that never agreed to this life of quiet despair. A raw force, uncivilized, undomesticated. It doesn't want comfort. It wants confrontation. It doesn't want peace. It wants truth. But you've been trained to fear it. They told you strength is aggression. That desire is selfish. That being too much makes you unlovable. So you clipped your own wings, bit by bit, day by day. Until now, you don't even try to fly. This is the sacred lie. That goodness is passive. That virtue means restraint. That morality is submission in disguise. But Nietzsche saw it, saw through it. He called it what it is, the morality of the herd, not created to free you, but to domesticate you. Not a virtue, but a cage, a system built by the weak to keep the strong ashamed of their power. That's why your fire frightens them. Because if you ever stopped performing, if you ever dared to speak, act, create from your center, you'd expose how dead they really are. You were born with a roar, and they taught you to whisper, to apologize for existing, to bow before everyone and everything but your own soul. But there is a voice beneath all this noise, a sacred violence, a wild clarity. It doesn't want validation. It wants rebirth. And Nietzsche, he doesn't offer salvation. He doesn't tell you what to believe. He doesn't care if you're comfortable. He hurls you into the abyss and waits to see if you rise. This is not philosophy. This is war. A war inside your skin, between the part of you that wants to be liked and the part of you that was born to be free. So the question is not, what is good? The question is, what have you sacrificed to be seen as good? And the answer is everything. But this is where the real path begins. Not in being accepted, but in becoming unbearable to your former self. The herd morality, a cage built from praise. You weren't raised to be free. You were trained to be approved of, to smile when you're dying, to nod when you disagree, to serve when your spirit wants to scream. And every time you complied, they called you good. Every time you bent, they called you mature. Every time you erased yourself, they called you noble. But goodness is not what they told you it was. It wasn't virtue. It was survival. It was fear. Fear of being cast out. Fear of disapproval. Fear of losing love you never truly had. They gave you one job: be likable. So you became nice, agreeable, predictable. You became what they needed, even when it killed who you were. You dressed up your wounds with manners. You wrapped your rage in courtesy. You buried your hunger beneath selflessness, and it worked. They praised you, but they weren't praising you. They were praising your submission. They were clapping for the mask. You call it peace. But peace that costs your soul isn't peace. It's a coffin. You call it compassion. But compassion that demands your silence is self-erasure. Look at yourself. Honestly. Look at the quiet despair under your smile. Look at the ache in your chest every time you say yes when you mean no. You think you're helping, but you're hiding. You think you're kind, but you're terrified. You think you're strong, but you're just exhausted from holding yourself hostage. Nietzsche knew. He saw the rot beneath the praise. This isn't virtue. It's slave morality. The silent virus that infects the strong and turns them against themselves. A morality created by those too afraid to rise, too bitter to accept their weakness. So they built a system to shame those who could walk alone. They made you believe that desire is sin, that confidence is arrogance, that power corrupts unless it's theirs. They taught you to resent your own strength. And now, whenever you feel something wild inside you, you suffocate it, you edit yourself, you censor your truth until only fragments remain. But what if the part of you that scares them is the only part that's real? What if the urge to break away, to live louder, to want without apology, is not your shame, but your salvation? You've been performing goodness for so long, you don't even know what you believe anymore. You've mistaken applause for love and politeness for purpose. But now, you're tired. Not tired from giving, tired from pretending. Pretending to agree, pretending to care, pretending to be less than what you are. And that's where the truth begins to boil. Because eventually, the soul that's been caged too long starts to bite back. Eventually, the need to be real outweighs the need to be liked. And when that moment comes, when you finally stop performing, when you stop twisting yourself into what they want, you'll feel it. Not guilt, not regret, but relief. Because killing the counterfeit virtue is not betrayal, it's resurrection, and it sets the stage for something ancient in you to finally rise. The virtue that overflows, the power of the Creator. There is another kind of virtue. It doesn't beg. It doesn't please. It doesn't ask for your applause. It simply is. It doesn't come from guilt or sacrifice or some desperate hunger to be seen as good. It comes from fullness, from fire, from the unbearable weight of being alive. This is not the virtue they taught you. This is not about controlling your instincts. It's about becoming so whole, you can no longer hold yourself back. Nietzsche saw it, not in sermons, not in saints, but in the sun. The sun does not shine to be thanked. It does not choose who is worthy of light. It gives because it cannot do otherwise. It shines because it must. And that is the highest virtue, not obedience, not self-denial, but the uncontrollable overflow of a complete soul. This is the Übermensch, not a tyrant, not a rebel, not a prophet, but a creator. Someone who no longer needs to justify their existence, who no longer asks permission to act, who no longer seeks meaning from outside, because they are the meaning. They give, not because it's right, but because they are too alive not to. They don't follow the rules. They don't break them either. They outgrow them. This kind of giving is not a behavior. It is a state of being. It doesn't ask for thanks. It doesn't need witness. It pours out like a storm, a poem, a scream, pure, raw, and unstoppable. And that's what frightens them. Because you can't manipulate someone who gives from abundance. You can't control someone who no longer needs praise. You can't cage someone who's made peace with their own wildness. But to become this, you must first face the truth. You've been living from a place of emptiness, trying to fill yourself through service, trying to earn your worth through sacrifice, trying to outrun shame with good deeds. You call it love, but it's bargaining. You call it morality, but it's penance. You're not giving. You're bleeding for acceptance, and it's killing you. The virtue that overflows begins where this ends, where you stop trying to be good, where you stop fearing your own force. It's not about trying harder. It's about stopping the war inside you, the war between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be. And in that stillness, something ancient rises. The Creator, the one who doesn't act from duty, but from inevitability, who doesn't wait for purpose, but creates it, who doesn't dim themselves for anyone, not even for peace. And this kind of life, it's not comfortable, it's not polite. It doesn't fit into categories. Because when you become this, you don't need anyone to tell you what to do. You act because you must. You shine because you cannot stop. You give because your soul has become the river. and it can no longer hold its flood. And it is here, in this uncontainable state, that you begin to remember who you were before the world told you how to behave. The final silence, let the light die and be reborn. But even the sun must rest. Even the greatest light cannot burn forever without first surrendering to the dark. Nietzsche understood this. He did not preach infinite giving. He did not glorify the martyr who empties himself until he fades. He honored the silence after the storm, the retreat after the creation, the sacred pause where the soul returns to itself, because even power needs solitude, even abundance needs silence, even the overflowing must stop before it rots. You've been told to give endlessly, to pour out no matter what's left inside, to stay visible, useful, available. But this is how spirits break. You are not a well without bottom. You are not a machine for the needs of others. You are a being, and being requires withdrawal. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. To pull away, to fall silent, to disappear. This is the most brutal truth. Even virtue must die. Even your best, your purest, your most luminous offering must be burned. Because what doesn't die stagnates, and what doesn't dissolve controls you. Look closely. What are you clinging to? An identity, a purpose, a role you've outgrown but can't release. What if the very thing you call sacred is now your cage? What if the gift you once gave the world has become your prison? There is a moment in every journey where continuing forward means first letting go. Zarathustra knew it. After giving his word, his vision, his fire, he did not stay to be worshipped. He vanished. He returned to the void, not in despair, not in defeat, but in renewal. Because the creator who never stops creating becomes hollow. The light that never rests burns toxic. And so he left. He fell silent. He died. Symbolically. Not to escape, but to return to the source. And this you must learn. To stop performing. To stop giving. To stop being for others. To vanish without explaining. To disconnect without guilt. To retreat, even from your own virtue. Because the death of what you were is the only path to what you must become. It is in this silence, this sacred stillness, that transformation happens. Not in the doing, but in the undoing. So let it burn. Let the identity, the expectations, the applause, all of it die. And in the ashes, don't reach back. Wait. Breathe. Because what rises next will not be a repetition of the old. It will be something terrifying, something holy, something true. You, unmasked, unchained, reborn. You don't need to be chosen. You need to choose yourself. If you've made it here, it's because something in you refused to keep sleeping. Maybe it's been quiet. Maybe you've ignored it for years. But it's always been there. That pressure in your chest, that scream behind your smile, that ache that says, "This life isn't mine. This isn't about being admired. This isn't about being moral. This is about being free, truly, savagely, existentially free. But freedom is not pretty. It is not applause. It is not safety. It is confrontation. It is death. It is choosing to let burn everything you built to survive, so something real can finally breathe. So now, the question is not theoretical. It's personal. It's brutal. What are you still clinging to that should have already died? An identity, a belief, a version of yourself too small to hold your truth. Then let it go. Let it burn. Let it collapse without ceremony, because you don't need to be chosen. You need to choose yourself, without permission, without applause, without waiting. And when you do, when you finally cut the cord to the life that's killing you, something ancient will rise, not from your strengths, but from your ashes. And from that silence, a new sound will begin. If this message hits something inside you, if it cracked open a silence you've been afraid to face, comment, "I choose the silence that rebuilds me." Write it, seal it, make it real. Then share this with someone still enslaved by approval, someone who needs to die before they live. Because this journey doesn't end here. It begins in the burning, and only the ones who choose themselves will survive it.